I started talking
with
to
this
Jonathan Nelson,
right.
and I said, I'd love to do a bluegrass festival. He said, well, why don't you do it? I said, well, I have no idea what you would do. He said, well, I have a friend named Dawn Holliday who runs Slim's nightclub, and she's the best booker in the world. And then she has a friend named Sherry Sternberg, who is the best production person in the world. She does, for example, the X Games for ABC and stuff. So the four of us had lunch, and the festival came out of the lunch.
But had you been going to concerts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, had you developed some favorites?
Yeah, but yes, absolutely. I mean, mostly, I don't know.
Scruggs and...
Well, but I was a little more Catholic in, Catholic in my approach. I mean, I really like the bands like the Kingston Trio and the Lamplighters and the Highwaymen. But I love Scruggs and Flat and Doc Watson and, the Stanley Brothers. And so, maybe that's not a very broad spectrum of music.
But it's an indication of what you're...
Yeah.
So you're going to concerts, and then he says, do it.
And the other sort of initiating factor was I did a favor for the firefighters the same year, and one of the captains and the lieutenant at the time, and the firefighter said, I understand you like this kind of music, listen to this. So he gave me a CD of Hazel and Alice, and it was Hazel Dickens and Alice Gerard. And I think the first song, but an early song on the CD, was The Disaster in the Maddington Mines. And I absolutely fell in love with that and with her. So that,
This is all kind of converging.
And I said, could we ever get somebody like that to come to a festival? And Emmylou Harris. So the two of them agreed to come the first year.
Yeah.
So the first year, I think we may have had two stages, maybe only one. I guess one. We had 12 bands over 2 days. And I said, do you think anybody will show up for this? And surprisingly, 10, 15,000 people showed up.
Right.
And at the end, I said to them, want to do it again? So it was sort of a year-by-year thing early.
And so Bonnie was working the permits and the advertising and...
Yeah, but also just logistics of bands.
Yeah, sure, flying them in. Now, are you paying for...
Everything.
Everything, yeah.
We've never had a commercial sponsor. This is my party.
Yeah.
And I'll cry if I want it.
Yeah.
This is a very arrogant statement, Lisa, but I'm not very interested in myself. And I think one of the reasons I get along so well with people is I'm really interested in them.
Right.
And I don't give a god. I know what I've done or what I haven't done.
I understand.
Yeah. And so the part that does, I mean, most of my friends, or some of them who've done, what do you call it?
Memoirs.
Memoirs.
Or autobiographies.
I mean, they're really fascinated by themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Firstly, let's talk about your own performance. You basically opened the second day of the festival.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And just how many numbers did you do? I meant to.
It was a 45-minute set, so we did about 9 or 10 numbers.
They just moved, 1, 2.
Yeah.
It just happened, and they were all just so flawless. It seemed to me.
Well, that was Heidi driving us, our music director.
Is that right?
No, I mean, we've done it a lot
you
now.
turn to her. I mean, she's.
Well, she sort of directs how we are on stage, but we have gotten better. And
yeah, you've been doing a lot.
I mean, in terms of working, continuity and going right from one tune into the next. And
then you brought up on stage.
Oh, Abigail Washburn.
So I went to see her performance, which was just.
Isn't she fantastic?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Her voice, her style, the synergy between the other men she played with. And she had someone handing her banjos and guitars. I had heard you at one performance saying, you were conflicted about or uncomfortable with someone being your change man.
Well,
what do they call it? Is there a term for that?
I don't know, banjo wrangler.
Okay. Yeah. But I saw her in
Banjo
several...
tech.
Banjo tech. I saw she and several other performers have some.
And Emmylou, changes guitars about every 30 seconds.
Right.
So.
Right. So were there highlights for you particularly?
Well, there was a highlight. I mean, the obvious ones: the Preservation Jazz Band and Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and the Blind Boys of Alabama. But there was an absolute high point for me, which was completely unexpected, out of the blue. I don't know if you heard this guy, Seamus Kennedy, at the porch stage. He's an Irish folk singer.
Yeah.
And he did not do a song in his set, which I really love, which was my mother's favorite song, called Seven Old Ladies Were Locked in the Lavatory. And we were in the food line, and I said, Seamus, I loved your set, but I wish you'd done Seven Old Ladies Were Locked in the Lavatory. And he said, do you know it? And I said, yeah. He said, well, let's do it together. So we went outside and we were singing. I said, I got an idea. Let's go in my camper and let's perform it for my wife. And we went in there, and it was as if 20 years or 10 years just rolled back. She went crazy. She was singing the verses. She was dancing. It was just phenomenal. I mean, it was, Chris is back.
It was inspired.
And then he finishes, and I guess she talked to him before. He said, so you're a London lass, are you? I can't copy. That's the best I can do with an Irish accent. And she said, yes. And he said, do you know the London Dustman? She said, of course I do. So the two of them sang this other song, which I didn't know, in its entirety together. So that was, I think that was the single best moment of the festival.
It's one of the most extraordinary gifts that someone has given to a city, that creates the kind of civic sense of well-being, that things go well in this town, that we can come together.
Well, that's also the genesis of the pension fund thing I'm involved in.
All right.
I mean, and they're related.
Okay.
But, I guess I'm becoming a starry-eyed, senile person or something, but I love consensus. I love people enjoying each other. I hate civic strife, and I think a lot of civic strife is just manufactured. It's just people, going through the motions because that's what you're supposed to do. And, go back before the festival, the underground parking facility, which was my life for a bunch of years. I just couldn't understand, as I think I told you earlier.
Yes, we did, but
I couldn't understand why people didn't love it. It sort of achieved what everybody wanted. It got cars out of the park. It made it possible to close the park, or at least part of it, on Saturday.
Well, I read that you're endowing it for years out.
Yes, that was sort of a colorful story. My children and Chris and I had a meeting a few years ago, and they're wonderful. I guess everybody thinks their children are wonderful, but I'm quite certain that mine are. And they said, let's talk about the things you'd like to see continue, after your demise, maybe later today, I don't know. And, they said, I said, well, we really like the Fellows program, which we've discussed. Yeah. And they said, that's great. And then one of them said, well, what about the festival? And I said, up to you guys. They said, gone. And I said, that was dumb. You just endowed it.